one host and 8 participants in this conference.
8 on the phone lines and 4 of us here. That's plenty. And we've had the nature of God and some talk about the nature of error, although that we'll be talking about that forever, I think. And then we did Ho'oponopono last week, which was, I got some response from that from people, which was a good thing. So today I thought we'd go into another one of Joel's favorite topics, which is the nature of prayer. And put that aside, and then maybe next week and the following week we'll get into supply and start into healing. While I was doing my morning meditations 5 or 6 weeks ago when this class was, or longer than that I guess it was now, but when this class was, when I was being given stuff that was supposed to be for the class, I got like 15 or 20 different things for the nature of prayer class. And I was looking at them and they're sort of in random order, but then I tried to put them in order and there is no meaningful order that I could find. So I think we'll just go over my list here and see what comes up. You know, these are the points that Joel makes over and over again when he talks about the nature of prayer. And really, the nature of prayer is just extremely simple, but by going through these, we can get a picture of it, and then at the end, we'll do a summary. Hello. We're about to be 5. Yes, now we're 5. First of all, there's 3 or 4 words that are buzzing around. There's prayer and there's meditation. For 15 years, I used to talk with my sponsor who prayed a lot. And I meditated a lot and didn't pray at all. And I was quite firm about the fact that I didn't talk to God. And, she always talked about praying, and it wasn't until, after listening to Joel for 30 years that I realized that she meant prayer in the sense that Joel means it. The words are used interchangeably, and prayer, meditation, treatment. And I'm going to pretty much limit prayer to, when I'm talking about prayer, I'm talking about communication with God. And Joel says there's 3 stages of that. There's being in communication with God, or in a position for communication for God, I guess, as much as we can do. And then there is communion, which is when there's actually communication with God going on. And then there's union, which is when there's no longer me, but just God going on. And all these notes come from the second level, because this is a communication. These bullets on prayer for the class are a communication from what we call God, or Spirit, consciousness, to me for the class. Okay, so that's the state of communion. So, and union is the full-on mystical experience that some people have once or twice or a few times in their lifetime, that where there's nothing but oneness and there's no sense of self at all. Personal self is completely destroyed. Some have it a lot. Joel did, and Some have it only once. Robert had it only once, but he never came back, so there was no one left to have it again, so he doesn't count. And the rest of them have varying amounts of it. So. We'll use meditation is sort of like preparation for prayer. The way I use it now. Although I just heard that in one sense it's prayer. I think of meditation as sitting in the morning and getting quiet and getting ready and trying to get receptive and perhaps doing some reading or some listening or stuff like that, and preparing yourself to try to achieve a state of communion. And that's pretty much what I use it for. And Joel talks even about contemplative meditation as the step before meditation. The contemplative meditation is specifically pondering over some God topic until you sort of exhaust it or your mind, and he uses that as a device in order to get your mind silent enough that you can be in a state of receptivity or communion. But the other way that I use meditation is in the sense of being here now. Learning to be present, practicing with eyes open when you're out in the world. Practicing the presence, practice of being here now. I often use the word meditation for that, and certainly the purpose of that is if you are here now, you're in the state of communion with God, or in a state of preparing to be in communion with God. So I guess maybe it is preparation, but being here now is a whole different way of preparing to be in communion with God, because you're being aware at every moment of the presence, or trying to be. And sometimes, I won't bother to use the word prayer. Treatment is not prayer. Treatment is, and that's used in the sense of treatment in the sense of spiritual healing or spiritual revealing or something like that. Treatment is not prayer. Treatment is the practice of perhaps reciting affirmations or whatever it takes. But treatment is the process of elevating yourself to the state where you can become aware of the presence of God. Okay, I'll try to use it just in that sense. So treatment is always of myself, never of you or of anybody at all. Treatment is of myself, and the purpose of treatment is to elevate myself to the point where I'm aware of the presence of God. And if I have elevated myself to the point where I'm aware of the presence of God, there is no more that Lee can do. It's now entirely up to grace. So that's what we'll use treatment for. But let's do some of the bullets that Joel likes to mention. I'll start down this list. He says the purpose of prayer is not to influence God. And that's an important one. God cannot be influenced. We can't get God's finished. Okay? God's outside of time. God is not in this world that we're in. The person who thinks he needs to pray to God to do something is not in my kingdom. It's in this world. It's in the dream, and God's not there. God's finished. So anything that God is not doing right now, God is never going to do, and God has always been doing. So any attempt to influence God is not a valid form of prayer. And the other thing Joel likes to point out, if God is since God is omnipresent and omniscient and omnipotent, well, since he's omnipresent and omniscient, there's certainly no reason to tell God anything. And God not only is omniscient, knows everything, God is everything. So there's absolutely no reason to, there's nothing you can say of an informative nature to God. You could perhaps tell him what's going on in the dream, but God doesn't seem to be very interested in what's going on in the dream. So, since God is omnipotent, there's no other power that you need to use God to affect or change or do anything about. Do you see that? Yeah, we see so many things that need changing, but do you see that it's all my perception? If I want God to change something, what needs to change is my perception, and I should be going to treatment rather than praying to God. Did you see that trying to get God to be a power over another power, it means that I'm in humanhood, and what's needed here is treatment, self-treatment. I need to lift myself up, or treatment via somebody else. I can get you to lift me up, but I need to be lifted. And we've added omni-activity, and so it's the same thing. Since God is the only activity, I don't need to spend any time or energy trying to get God to do anything or stop doing anything. All activity is God activity. And if I'm not happy with God activity, we're back to treatment, not talking to God. God is spirit, Joel likes to point out. And spirit means not material and not mental. And the implications of God being spirit is that we can't pray for anything material, because God doesn't have anything. Joel likes to say God doesn't have anything material, and the stronger statement is there is nothing that's material. Material is our sense of God's individualizations as spirit. So God is spirit, and God is expressed as spiritual forms. We can use the word forms or spiritual ideas. It's all in consciousness. Spirit means consciousness. And God is expressed as spiritual forms, and we see them as material forms because of our level of consciousness. Our perception of God is materially. So we're seeing material forms, and so the idea of praying for something material makes no sense, because God doesn't have anything. Let alone the fact that God's done and complete and everything, but God doesn't have anything. And the reason I like to go over all this is we need to get really, I'm going to go through this list, but we need to get completely weaned from the idea of going to God to get or change anything. And yet, we need to strengthen our practice of going to God.
Okay.
But we're going to God, for realization of God, not for anything or anything to change. We're going for God treatment, I guess we could call it. God reveals more of itself to us. That would be a God treatment rather than self-treatment. So, God doesn't have anything material, so there's no sense asking for rent or girlfriends or boyfriends or health. I had a eye-opener for the script work. God is a fantasy script. Nothing more than a fantasy script. God is, praying to God is a fantasy script. It's an attempt to get God to do something for me that I can't do for myself, and without a change in consciousness. So I'm expecting, so God in the Orthodox sense, in the sense of praying for Orthodox prayer, praying for stuff, in that sense, that God, the God that you would pray to for something, is a fantasy script, which is a good thing to put in the I hope I put that in the 13th edition of the book. I think I got that in there. Maybe it says one of the ponder this, you ponder this or something. Joel says somewhere, pray for anything you like as long as it's not of this world. If you're praying for things that you are in material consciousness and therefore not in prayer. I don't know about the praying for anything you like. I mean, the idea that you're praying to God for anything you want is still slightly misleading because God's finished. You know, if you're thinking you're going to influence God to give you more knowledge, no. If you're using a prayer for something spiritual, if you're using that as part of treatment, part of raising yourself to, you know, I get the sense that there might be humility involved in there. You know, I need more knowledge, and there certainly is an opening and a receptivity, and in that sense, it's prayer. But once again, you know, I don't know why we're praying for things spiritual rather than just opening ourselves to God and going to God. I wish Joel were around so I could ask him that. I don't see the sense in praying for things spiritual, although I do see the sense in praying, you know. So, he quotes James in the Bible as saying, if prayer is not answered, we are praying amiss. And that one's pretty clear. If we're praying for anything, I just got a new point on that. All right. If we're praying for anything and it's not answered, then we're praying amiss. If we're praying in the sense of in communion, then that prayer is not unanswered. My glitch, you know, I mean, so I sit in the silence and I still don't have this or that or the other thing, you know. If I'm praying in the state of communion and my prayer is not answered, the praying is right, but the prayer is amiss, because I'm now looking at something, you know. I don't have next month's rent, you know, so so I go into the silence and not praying for anything, but just go into the silence, you know, for a month and a half, and the rent doesn't show up, you know. I'm praying amiss. The prayer is not correct in that the idea that the rent needs to be paid is obviously not correct, since if it were, then that would be part of omni-activity. So if I'm sitting in the silence realizing the presence of God and the rent is not coming through, then rent is not part of omni-activity. And what needs to be corrected again is what I'm praying for. Jill talks about, when his business was going south, his professional business was going south, he went to a practitioner trying to get help, and the business got worse. And he went to another practitioner trying to get help, and the business he kept going to 5 practitioners he went to, and every time it got worse, okay? Now, this is not because the practitioners were not elevating to these were good practitioners. Joel was a very high practitioner, and people he called on were good, you know. And it didn't work, right? It looked like. The point is that his business got so bad he had to go into the healing ministry. So all 5 of those practitioners did great work. Praying was working, everything was working, omni-activity was working. He was being redirected into the healing and teaching ministry where he needed to be. And the only thing that was amiss was that he thought he should be in the business world instead of the healing ministry. So that's what, it's in that sense that prayer is amiss if you're if your idea of your needs is not being met, if you are sitting in the presence of God, experiencing the presence of God, the prayer is being answered. I mean, God is revealing Himself to you. Things are happening. If you're experiencing the presence of God, good things are happening, but they may not be what you want or where you're looking when you come out of the prayer and start looking around to see if that worked. So that's what I get out of that. Prayer does not include words or thoughts meant for God. The words and thoughts were meant for yourself to lift yourself to the place of silence where you can be in contact with God. It's like the reason we need no words or thoughts is that if you're thinking, you're in personal sense. That we need to get to. We're trying to get transparent so that God's reality can be realized here. And words and thoughts and stuff like that is blocking the transparency. So we need to be truly silent, and need to be also silent in the sense of no desires when you go into prayer, except conscious contact with God. I mean, you sit down to pray, and your intention is to establish to realize the presence of God. So your only desire is conscious contact with God. Any other desire means that you have an agenda which may be different from God's agenda. Prayer is the attitude of listening for God's Word. And later on, attitude and that receptivity. So the attitude to have in prayer is one of receptivity. We're listening for the Word of God. We're listening to the still small voice. We're listening for impulses or desires arising, intuitions arising, saying that I shouldn't say desires in the sense of wanting something, but inclinations to do this or that, leaning towards things or leaning away from things. We should listen very sensitively to directions, and sometimes we actually get words, perhaps in the thought of sentences. I don't hear a voice, but I get sentences, that I'm reading some of to you now. I hear complete thoughts, but they get presented as thoughts, and then tagged as that's for the class. He talks a lot about the Sermon on the Mount type stuff that, and a lot of what Jesus taught, and the point of all of that is that if we're not completely at peace with our fellow man, it will prevent successful prayer, is the point there. Hatred, animosity, resentment, etc. for any individual or group or race or nation or ethnicity will prevent prayer if it's active in your consciousness, or to the extent that it's active in your consciousness. Which is to say, seeing any one other than God is a sign that you're not in God consciousness. Okay? So only to the extent that we are at peace with everyone and everything can we be transparent and therefore able to commune. It means it takes a me to have hatred or resentment or animosity or etc. for anybody or anything, and I need to get rid of that me if I want to hear God. For prayer to be effective, there must be no sense of separation, because if there's a sense of separation, then I'm present. Praying for friends avails us nothing Jesus says, and that's because that's a very material consciousness. But praying for our enemies avails us everything, because in doing so we are transforming ourselves into loving beings, raising our frequency and becoming more transparent. So praying for our enemies is really a treatment. It's not talking to God. It's not asking God to do something for our enemies. It's lifting ourselves to the position of being able to see the oneness in it. The way we pray for someone is to raise and strengthen the vibration of our own concept of them, by remembering that they too are expressions of God living through grace. Praying for your enemy means lifting yourself. Well, it takes humility. It starts with humility, which is a good step up, a good step in the right direction, but eventually, you're praying that they receive God's grace, which they are receiving, or that God's grace be revealed to them would be a better way of saying that. That would be the way you would pray for your enemy, that God's grace be fully revealed to them, and in doing so, you're raising your own frequency, your own vibration, and you're lifting yourself towards oneness, seeing, loving your neighbor as yourself. Forgiving 70 times 7, loving our neighbors as ourselves, doing unto others as we would have them do unto us, are all steps towards dying to material sense, steps towards reducing our sense of separateness. They're all just, they're all humility things. I keep getting the word humility again, which I guess humility is lack of personal sense, lack of defensive personal sense anyway. But lack of personal sense, yeah. So, the idea of prayer is to get silent in the sense of rid of yourself, which requires getting rid of goals or desires or plans or anything like that, and getting receptive, whatever that means to you, but being receptive and getting quiet and being that way. And once you're there, once you've done as much of that as you can, that's it. That's all you can do. And then you sit in that silence for as long as the silence maintains, as long as you can. But Joel often says that 30 seconds is plenty, and sometimes there's a definite feeling of the presence, and each of us that feels different. But there's something shifts, and suddenly, and I'm not going to say what it's like, but something shifts, and suddenly it's like God is present. And all I can say is suddenly it's like God is present, but suddenly it's like God is present. Oh, here it is. So if you can sit for that 30 seconds or so, and you achieve that, and you're suddenly aware of the presence, and this is the feeling that I think Joel means when he talks about God being on the field. He becomes aware. He gets the click. That's what I mean. What he calls the click, that God is on the field. Suddenly, you get the sense that God is present. Suddenly you realize that, and it's not like God showed up. Suddenly you realize that God is present. That's better yet. Suddenly you realize that God is present, which is because your consciousness is elevated to the altitude where you can realize the presence of God. And now that God is present, all the good stuff happens, which means that more of the nature of God, which is to say the nature of you, is revealed. When God is present, the activity takes place, and now the things that are necessary to unfold you more will be brought to you. And it may look like your job being successful. It may look like a new career. It may not look like the rent being paid. It may look like a move to another state or another country or something like that. We're wide open to it. But when the presence of God is felt, we are completely done, and that's it. That's in my understanding and experience, that's literally as much as you can do. I mean, that's it. You're there, and that's it, and your work is done, and now it will unfold as God sees fit, as it has been up till now too. But now it will unfold as God sees fit, and you've done as much as you can to get out of the way and allow it to happen. And probably you will sit there as long as it lasts, as long as that elevation is maintained. And you can't maintain the elevation of your consciousness that is aware of the fact that God is present. You can't maintain that, because that would require getting you into gear to maintain it, and that would crash it down right away. So you can't even maintain it. But you will certainly sit there as long as it is maintained, as long as it maintains itself, because it's a nice place to sit, and so that's fine. And at that point, then what happens is what happens, and you may hear words or get directed or get stuff for a class or a check may come in the mail or a healing may occur. The non-God stuff may be dissolved in an instant, or it may initiate the process so that the non-God stuff, the disease or sickness or whatever, seems to resolve over time. Like I say, now good things happen, and because God is present, and God is all there is. But now you're in a position where more of God can be revealed to you, because you're aware now of the presence of God. Let's see if that's it. Yeah, I think that is the nature of prayer, as much as I want to say about it. I did get one question in the emails. It's not really 4 o'clock yet, so let's take this question. I did get one question in the email, and it's a great question. I'm really glad that this question was sent and that we can do it in class. Dr. Hulen saw that criminally insane patients emanated from his mind, and when his mind experienced the truth, the outpicturing of the patients revealed the harmony. But wasn't it his level of consciousness that brought this about? Let me just change one thing in that initially. The criminally insane patients did not emanate from his mind. There were no criminally insane patients. what emanated from Chubb's beliefs was the concept of criminally insane patient. Okay? And then what he was doing was self-treatment. And when he experienced the truth, the outpicturing of the patient revealed the harmony. Yes, that's true, because now he's revealing the truth, experiencing the truth. And so his concept has changed, and so he's seeing the harmony where the criminally insane used to be. And she says, but wasn't it his level of consciousness that brought this about? Yes, absolutely. The fact that he treated himself and raised his level of consciousness. First of all, the fact that it was a guy who was capable of raising his consciousness to that altitude, but yeah, he raised his consciousness to the level where he could no longer see the untruth. Joel talks about God being unable to experience, being too pure to behold iniquity. And what that means is that God consciousness, when you're in a state, a level of consciousness that is God consciousness, you do not see inequity. And that's what he was doing, was raising himself to that level. That's a perfect description, I think, of what he was doing. Joel would experience the presence of God, to continue the letter, Joel would experience the presence of God in his meditation, and the harmony unfolded with patience and situations. Absolutely. Wasn't that his level of awareness and consciousness that brought about the healing? Absolutely it was. No question about it. Without Joel doing that, the patients would not have healed, and the situation would not have unfolded. The fact that Joel could experience the presence of God was exactly what brought about the healings. I'm seeing in my own garden the plants thrive and grow so beautifully. People that visit my garden often say, I can't grow that, or that plant dies when I try to grow it. I can give them garden techniques, but is it not picturing of the harmony in my consciousness? Absolutely. Your garden is clearly, it's probably getting more beautiful every year that you do this work, and absolutely your gardening is an outpicturing. It's certainly the reflection of the harmony and beauty and love in your consciousness. You know, it's you. You're looking at yourself, and it's a beautiful thing. In other words, am I correct in saying a technique like Dr. Len and the Infinite Way can lead us to truth, but the harmony in our lives will only come from the level of God awareness or consciousness? Yes, that is exactly right. Is the harmony and health in my garden from the level of consciousness, from years of experience? It's undoubtedly, in your case, from your consciousness. You know, the level of consciousness that you have is being reflected out there. The years of experience would also help people like me grow stuff that looks nice. But, you know, you're expressing God through plants and nature, and so that certainly is a reflection of your level of consciousness. But yeah, people could intellectually do exactly all the right stuff and produce very beautiful gardens, but you know, you can do all the right stuff and make a really beautiful garden, you know, and then God consciousness comes along and it clicks. Something happens, you know, and all of a sudden it's a whole level up, even though not much change. When I was doing a lot of websites, I'm a nerd guy and I'm a good technician, and I could make a very clean, attractive website, and everything was fine about it. And then I would go to a graphic design artist that I knew, and she would change the size of a heading, or change a font, or move a picture, or make little minor adjustments on the page, and it would just pop. And it was like, oh wow, because she was an artist, and I'm not an artist. You know, I'm a nerd, and she's an artist, and there was a huge difference. You know, oh wow, yeah, you know, and I might have done that by trial and error. But she didn't do any trials and error. She just went directly to the change this, and this, pop, you know. And because she could see it already. And so in the same way, I think a really good person could make a really healthy, fine, substantial, thriving garden, but you add God consciousness to it, and suddenly that really healthy, fine, thriving garden will be 20 or 50 or 100% more healthy and thriving and everything. So, the God consciousness is the part that knocks your socks off. Yeah. So, I would say that both work, but God consciousness would. You tell somewhere it talks about people taking over a dairy farm and the milk production going up 20%, or people taking over a farm and the production. You would expect that adding consciousness to a well-managed place would increase its magnificence, because now you're seeing more God, So hopefully that answers the question. We'll find out after the break. Let's take a break until 10 after the hour, and then we'll talk about this and anything else for the next hour. Thank you.